Good morning.
Good morning.
Where's Elliot? Got the sound going? What a great job. Thank you. My name is John Odell, and just to warn you, I'm not a preacher, so I don't know how to preach. All I know how to do is tell stories. And you're laughing, yes. But I do tell stories. In fact, I really love the story in the first lesson. There's something about the Israelites not being able to look Moses in the face. There had to be a veil there. And there seems to be a general caution across varying religions about looking directly in the face of the sacred. Staring at divine truth head-on without the veil of rationalization or denial or ritual or allegory. And I do believe that the truth, if we see it before we're prepared, can be quite a shock. It can mark us or set us apart from those who we love, our families, our communities, even our church, the customs and beliefs that tell us that we belong. Truth can make an outsider of us in our own home. Flannery O'Connor, a fellow Southerner, knew what she was talking about when she said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd." To belong, sometimes I've chosen not to see the truth. While my mother was giving birth to me in the little town of Warrow, Mississippi, Willie McGee, a black man, was being legally lynched only a few blocks away from the courthouse to the cheers of over 1,000 white citizens. This picture was on the cover of Time magazine. If you walked a bit north, you could spy the mansion a young Leontine Price regularly helped her aunt clean until the white lady of the house heard her sing and got her into Juilliard. And if you kept walking to the other side of town, you might spy a respected businessman and Sunday school teacher, Sam Bowers, the owner of Sambo's Amusement Company, closing up shop. He was only a few years away from becoming the imperial wizard of the KKK of Mississippi burning fame and charged with planning one of the bloodiest atrocities of the civil rights era. That was home sweet home. But I knew none of these things until I was well into adulthood. And like most white citizens, I was blinded to these events and assumed they had nothing to do with me. It changed me to admit it. In the white-defined society in which I was raised, blacks were considered merely background. This was worse than physical segregation. This was psychological segregation. It wasn't that we were taught not to associate with blacks, because in our time, close association was necessary. Instead, we were taught to see half the population not as individuals, but as functionaries. Maids, yardmen, field workers. A veil was dropped between us and those other people. I distinctly remember the day the veil dropped. I was about 8 and sitting under a tree in our backyard on a hot summer day. Over in the next yard, I spotted an elderly black man in a flannel shirt breaking straw. "Why are you wearing that hot shirt?" I asked. "Ain't you burning up?" He looked down at me and smiled. He explained that he wore the shirt because it made him sweat. And when a breeze came up, it was like air conditioning. As I mulled over the wisdom of his reply, his employer, an older white lady, approached us. Now, her name was Helen Callahan. I called her Miss Helen. Not because she was unmarried, which she wasn't, but because older white women were not addressed using either Mrs. or their last names. When they advanced past some unspoken age, you just knew to address them using Miss and their given name. It's part of the complex nomenclature of titling in the South. As was typical of older Southern women, Miss Helen felt obligated to shape every rough-edged boy within her purview into a young Southern gentleman. So besides teaching me various titles of respect, she told me always to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am. Never to talk with my mouth full, and to keep my elbows off the table. Now, I loved Miss Helen dearly. She was one of the gentlest and most refined women I ever came across. To make her proud was my most noble ambition. "What y'all doing out there?" she asked sweetly, joining the yard man and me. minding my manners and wanting to make her proud, I said, "I'm just out here talking to Mr. Joe." And Miss Helen knitted her brows and pursed her lips in a way that indicated I had been somehow unmannerly. "No, Johnny," she said, "Joe's not a mister. Joe's a nigger." You may be shocked when you hear this. After all, the vernacular is distasteful, if not abhorrent nowadays. But this was 1959 Mississippi, and when it happened, I felt somehow relieved. Suddenly, so much in my world made sense. In that moment, I understood why there were certain water fountains I was not supposed to drink out of, why blacks had to eat their food from the cafe out of the alley, while the shacks in Colored Town had no paint and the roads had no pavement. It all made perfect sense. No longer did these conditions seem arbitrary. I finally understood that it was about color. And Joe's color was wrong and mine was somehow right. "Now one day Joe will call you mister," Miss Helen went on, "but never the other way around." She was gazing sweetly at Joe. Her words had not been harsh, nor her tone unkind. There was no villainy in what she believed, only the Christian truth. It was obvious she cared for Joe. And Joe was also smiling pleasantly, nodding his head in agreement. This was the way it was supposed to be, I thought. And it was just fine with everybody. It was indeed a fine thing to be a white boy in Mississippi. The silence of an entire race was evidence of your superiority. At that moment, a veil fell between Joe and me. To seal the deal, there's a prohibition in the South against blacks looking whites in the eyes. At one time, I believed that this was a demonstration of servility required of African Americans. But now I have a different theory. When you look at a person in the eye long enough, it's impossible to see merely a functionary or the other. You see a father or a mother or a child, a human being, an individual. So of course there had to be a prohibition against eye contact. How could you impose such a dehumanizing system of governing as Jim Crow upon African Americans if you were continually being reminded of their humanity? As the theologian Douglas Horton puts it, if conscience is the window of our spirit, evil is the curtain. Even at 30, when I moved to Minnesota in 1980, I was an unredeemed racist. And this may surprise you, but I found Minneapolis an easy place to be a racist. In this liberal bastion of Hewitt-Humphrey, no one ever told me to lay off telling racist jokes. Everyone just laughed uncomfortably, maybe, and shook their heads like I was incorrigible but charming, a real character. In fact, the owner of the Edina Company made me Vice President of Human Resources for our exclusively white organization. His only words to me were, when he announced my promotion, "You are now our gatekeeper. You decide who will join us. Just make sure you hire people who will fit into our family. People who are like us." And then he winked. I got it. He meant don't hire minorities. Oh, I thought, that's the difference between northern racism and southern racism. Northerners are just nicer about it.